Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you all had a wonderful long weekend. Thank you so much for joining me today for our discussion on grief and loss, helping youth heal, the latest installment in our Family Education Project webinar series. My name is Whitney Clausen, and I'm the Family Education Specialist at the Mental Health Association for New York State's School Mental Health Resource and Training Center. Members of our tech team will be providing support during this webinar, and our program director, Amy Malloy, will hop on to join us for a Q&A at the end. As with previous webinars, this one's being recorded and will be archived on our website along with some additional resources. If you take a look at the upper right corner of your screen, you'll see something that looks like two boxes stacked on top of each other. The first is for audio selection, and if you'd like to join by phone, click the phone option and a call number will show up, and be sure to use the PIN provided. Please remember that all attendees are in listen-only mode, but there's a second box where you can type any questions that you may have, including any problems with the audio or video. The Mental Health Association in New York State Incorporated improves the lives of individuals, families, and communities by raising mental health awareness, ending stigma and discrimination, and promoting wellness and recovery. The School Mental Health Resource and Training Center was established by Mahaney's with funding from New York State to help schools implement a law requiring mental health instruction as part of the K-12 curriculum. This webinar series is provided with funding from the Mother Cabrini Health Foundation. During our time together today, we will briefly discuss the stages of grief, talk about the different characteristics of grief in youth, and talk about some strategies to help them heal. This topic can be challenging, especially if you're currently experiencing a loss, so please take time to care for yourself if this becomes difficult. When we think about grief and loss, the most common one we may think about is the loss of a loved one. A study done in the summer of 2019 showed the majority of Americans are dealing with pain and grieving. 57% reported experiencing a major loss in the last 3 years. 32% noted it being a death of a family member, 3% specifically a spouse, 2% a child, while 20% of people were impacted by the loss of a pet. And I can relate to that. Unfortunately, this morning I did lose my betta fish, so we're all managing something here. This research also showed us that typically the first year is the hardest, and for those grieving the loss of a partner or child, they can be intensely grieving still at year 3. Regardless, it's important to understand that everyone will experience this differently, and there's no right or wrong time frame. We've been facing additional challenges of a pandemic for 8 months now, and the uncertainty of having no end date can further exacerbate our grief experience. A recent Kaiser Family Foundation poll found that nearly half of Americans reported that the current pandemic is harming their mental health, and people may be dealing with other types of losses as well, including loss of social connections, missed milestones, lack of economic stability, unemployment, major changes in their lifestyle, and so on. There are many models on the stages of grief, but the most popular or well-known is probably the Elisabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief model. They're listed here as denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. These are not set in stone, and some people do not go through all of them. They may go back and forth. So again, there's no right answer, and each individual will have a specific process that's influenced by their social supports, their individual experiences, their spiritual and religious processes, and their views of the death in general. Other well-known theorists include David Kessler, who highlights finding meaning, and sometimes loss can help motivate us to make positive changes, so it's important to consider that as a hopeful final stage. Denial can occur, when we first face this loss. It's not uncommon to want to reject the information and feel like this couldn't possibly be happening. Regardless of the type of loss, when that shock sets in, we might hear things like, they're not gone, they'll be over on Sunday, or this can't be true, the test is wrong. This is a very emotional part of the process for people and requires a different amount of time depending on the needs. Anger can usually be experienced in situations like this, and it's usually used as a coping mechanism or a way to mask the pain and hurt that's actually being experienced. And not everyone goes through this, and some people will linger here for longer than they want, so it really just depends. Then bargaining kind of comes into play when you hear people trying to regain that sense of control after feeling vulnerable and helpless in the situation. Kids may say things like, I promise I'll take them on more walks if Skip just comes back, or if only I'd called them more, they would still be here. Another is depression, which may set in after we slow down long enough to let those emotions sink in. We can start to feel foggy, confused, and overwhelmed. Some people, again, may be stuck in this phase. So if that's the case, it's always important to seek additional support. Last, acceptance may need some clarification because it doesn't mean that the person is necessarily happy or has moved on, but it's a sign that they're coming to terms with the loss and that they've accepted the reality of the situation. Again, this is not a linear process. We may go back and forth through these, and everything is so grounded in that sociocultural context. So beliefs and rituals will make a lot of impact on the process as well. For example, something that may differ is people bringing young children to services. That might be totally appropriate for your family, but others may find it scary, you know, and to each their own. So we have to be respectful of that. So moving on, we'll talk about how to talk about grief. I mean, there's no way around it. This is a tough conversation, but there are some things that we can do to make it a little bit easier so everyone can feel like their experience is validated. Caregivers can follow the child's lead in regards to the topic. A lot of times they're already aware of death. They've seen dead bugs, the goldfish, their characters in fairy tales, but we need to help them understand it and determine what they already know. When we give them the right information, they're better able to manage the emotional event as it plays out. And knowing those ebbs and flows in the process are coming, that can help us to be more patient and prepared to talk and listen when they are ready to share. And it's also important to identify any communication barriers like avoidance that might be going on in the home. Children tend to mimic the adult reactions and might pretend that everything is fine when actually they're struggling. So kids will take note of these things. So just be mindful. A lot of times they don't want to disrupt the status quo, so they may be keeping feelings or concerns to themselves. Staying open and being ready to talk again is really important, and just keeping things age appropriate and honest really helps the process. You'll find the right balance of giving information, and you know, if the loss is especially tragic, this can be difficult. Sorry, that was my doorbell there. If you do not have an answer to a question that someone has asked you, you can just say that, you know, I'm not quite sure, but we can figure that out together. So validating those feelings and experiences is very important, and checking back in frequently to help them stay connected is important here. Another thing to consider is that physical comfort might benefit some children, but for others, they may not prefer it. There might be other soothing techniques that you'd want to try instead. So again, you know your child best, and you know what works well. So moving on, when you're talking about grief with infants and toddlers, they may not be able to understand all of what we say, but they can certainly pick up on the emotional changes within their environment and that distress that the caregivers are feeling. They can feel if someone is tense, angry, or upset, and then in turn become irritable, struggle to fall asleep, experience loss of appetite, or become easily startled, or start to feel clingy. If the caregiver is using positive coping skills and managing how stress is impacting them, these changes might seem less disruptive for the child. And calm and comfort can look different in every home, but finding time to be close to our little ones can help relieve their stress and ours. When we're talking to young children, you know, those preschoolers, those 2 to 5-year-olds, it's crucial to use clear language and be careful with terms like laid to rest, no longer with us, or we lost them. Kids here have magical thinking and view things as temporary, so this can lead to problems down the road if they believe that a person or pet may come back. Watching things like their favorite cartoon characters miraculously heal every episode kind of adds to this belief. So they might think this is the same case for living beings. So we want to be clear on their process here. It may be difficult to help them understand that when things die, they no longer breathe, dead flowers no longer bloom or grow, and dead pets no longer play. But this is important to help them understand the permanency of the event, and that people who pass or animals who pass can no longer do these things. But it should be noted that if the death that they're experiencing is by sickness, you may want to explain the difference between a very serious illness and then the common cold, because we don't want them to confuse something that's life-threatening with something that may happen on the day-to-day. Again, we just want to avoid causing them any extra stress. So again, keeping that conversation open, things may come up as holidays or events occur, and the conversation may need to be had again. So moving on to the older kids, by the time they're around 6 or so, they're in school, they understand that death is permanent and that all living things will eventually die, but they somehow still think that they can escape this, right? They don't see it as entirely personal. This would be seen if they understand that grandpa has passed away, but not why grandma is sad. So they don't quite grasp the personal dynamics of the loss yet, or the relational impact it has on others. So you may see them asking, like, why is grandma crying? So an answer could be, grandma's crying because when grandpa died, it made her very sad. She misses him very much. They were together a long time. Or if it's a non-death related loss, something like a fire, say, you could say, the woman is crying because she lost her home and now she's lost some of her favorite things. Something that makes it clear and gives them a chance to connect to it. As they age through this stage, they become more focused on learning about death. They might find them talking about cemeteries or skulls, ghosts, haunted places in town, right? This is just them trying to explore the topic and gain more information. So giving them the information is helpful, so they can have all the facts and create their own view of the process. Okay, so our older adolescents, when they experience grief, this can be really unique because they're already experiencing so many changes during this time already. A lot of times you may see them take on the hero or protector mindset. They might want to try to keep things stable for everyone in the home. A lot of everything's fine, I'm good. And this is just a result of stuffing things down and wanting to make others happy. And this, of course, comes with the best intentions, but we know that can be problematic if we don't talk about things and get support as we need it. So sometimes they also experience the not me thinking, right? They know death is real and permanent, but it's never going to happen to them. You may find them starting to feel disenchanted or wondering what's the point. They might feel lost. They're starting to experience the adult emotions that we face as well. They may be losing contact or checking out from once loved activities, sleep issues, poor appetite. It's really a struggle, so keep checking in and see if you can see those changes as they occur. So everyone, again, experiences things differently, so it's really hard to compile a list that covers everything. So you'll see some common experiences here, but we're just going to talk about a few. These are more for our kiddos here, but you'll see it's pretty much very similar to the things that we experience as adults as well. So you might find that children become whiny, clingy, or reluctant to leave their caregiver. This may also be the case if they become angry or act out. Sometimes they may feel extra sad and isolate more. In some cases, regressing back to childlike behaviors, maybe wetting the bed or baby talk. It really just depends on the situation. Again, like adults, they can start to lose that sense of purpose, become disorganized, and feel unsettled. So we really just want to stay, on top of those things to make sure there's no issues arising in their extracurriculars or their academics. And it's also not uncommon to hear complaints of aches and pains. 67% of those people in the survey noted physical pain with their griefs, like headaches, stomach aches, heartburn, and so on. So things to look out for. While navigating the painful stages of grief can feel never ending, it's important to remember that we are resilient as humans, right? We can overcome adversity, and we've proven that. During times of loss, it can be difficult to make sense of things, but we can find structure and support in keeping a routine, whether we are adults or thinking about our family unit as a whole. We might feel like things are out of control when we're grieving, so maintaining that balance is so important to help us get through. And COVID has definitely presented us with unique challenges, some things that some of us have never faced before. These quarantine rules and limitations have seriously impacted our abilities to connect. So, we may find ourselves on one day saying, hey, we got this, look at us go. And then the next, everything's hitting the fan and we're a heap of tears, and that's all normal. It's part of the process. So again, talk about it. It's going to help us heal, and you'll find that you may not be the only one. So again, exactly, dealing with grief can feel lonely, but you're not alone. So there are times as families and caregivers, we need extra support, and that's okay. There's no shame in that, especially when we're dealing with children, right? Trust your gut. You know your child best. If there's something that just seems out of line, or like you're not able to address it yourself, try to find some supports in your area because they are available to you. Regardless of the loss, New York does have statewide services to help connect you to a lot of different programs, and there are specific ones for children and adults. There are even grief camps that kids could attend locally. You can start by searching your local hospice or hospital centers online, and they'll connect you. There's also a lot of really great books online, too, that we like to highlight, or Grief is Like a Snowflake and Bug in a Vacuum, which kind of go through the emotions related to the loss. And those are really great ones for kids. So we'll post those when we share this link. Talking to your children's teachers and school staff can also be helpful when the loss occurs. Trying to be proactive about this so they can talk about any sudden changes, or again, pick up on those academic issues that might occur. They can also be positive connections for your child if they begin to struggle through the day-to-day and need someone to connect to on site. If you're supporting someone who's grieving, there are some things that grievers have noted that are more helpful and some things that should be avoided. So when people reach out to a grieving person, this lets them know that they're being thought of. But when a loss occurs, there's often an outpouring of support right at first, right? And then things start to dwindle and fall off. And a lot of people identified that as a really hard time, the weeks after the initial event. Some people say that reaching out and saying, let me know if you need anything, is a mode that they've tried, but people experiencing the loss find this to be challenging because it's a nice sentiment, but it leaves things up to the person grieving to initiate the support, which might be too difficult for them at the time. So instead, if we can offer clear support, that's better. Hey, do you want me to take the kids to the park on Saturday so you can relax? Or I was thinking about dropping dinner off. Would Tuesday be okay? This makes it easier for them to accept the help instead of finding energy to reach out and seek it. And consistency is so important here because a person may not feel immediately ready to accept that help, but if we keep checking in or just sending a hello, they'll know where to find it when they're ready to engage in it, and when that time is right, they'll know that they can come to you for that safe space. Again, just also be mindful of any cultural norms and the unique experience the person is having. Some things that they found not to be helpful, and in some cases hurtful, were kind of a surprise to me. So one thing was 11% of those people surveyed said that when someone posted about their personal loss on their own personal Facebook page, this kind of bothered them. So they understood that the post had good intentions, but sometimes if the loss is too fresh and other people are posting about it, it can be difficult for the family to see all of those things at once. So finding the right way to have social media boundaries is always important, especially in this case. Checking in before putting that information out there would be a really important reminder. Minimizing things was another big one for people on the list. So avoiding words and phrases like, oh, things could be worse, or comparing your own personal loss. Sometimes we try to do this to feel connected, and in some cases that is appropriate, but we shouldn't be comparing them in terms of severity or importance. That's inappropriate, and it sends a signal that the person is not justified in their experience or the emotions that they are feeling. So when we use supportive language instead, this lets them know that we're not looking to fix things. We just want to hold space with them and let them know that there's room for them to share. Another was rushing the process. So if saying things like, it's been a year, how are you not over it? Or it's time to move on, can be hurtful. And although it might seem encouraging, there are nicer, kinder, gentler ways to say this. And it's important to understand that we will slip up with this. We might not always say the right thing, but if that does happen as well, kind of just acknowledge it and let the person know you're trying and that you're open to their suggestions. So it's a tough one, but knowing ultimately that the support is there is really helpful for people. So while there's no set timeline, it's important to recognize some cases where symptoms of extreme or complicated grief can last more than 6 to 12 months. This can become debilitating for the person's day-to-day life, and if their functioning is impacted by the loss still in a way where they're not able to take care of their responsibilities, they may need some extra support. And there are the risk factors for this type of grief. You can see this in a traumatic death, or if person or family has prior experiences with loss or trauma, or have high levels of attachment to the person, or if the loss was just really unexpected or sudden. So knowing those things can help you prepare to look out for those complicated grief symptoms. Experiencing this type of loss, really would require some additional medical or mental health support. So with that being said, we'll talk about your supports today. If you'd like to share who your biggest supporter is at the time, you'll see a poll on your screen. You may click more than one. We'll just give you a second to check in there. And just another second to finish up. I know this can be heavy, so we just want to check in and see where we're all at today. Okay, so it looks like 81% of you said family, 62% said friends, co-workers are 30%, in your own personal strength, self-care being 48%, religious 20%. All right, so it looks like you guys are feeling supported in a lot of different ways, and that makes me very, very happy. And I love that a lot of you said your own personal strengths and self-care activities as well, because there's so much power to be found in that. So thank you guys for sharing. And moving on, we will just talk about a few more ways to take care of ourselves and others, right? Because we know when we can do that, we're so much better for the ourselves and the other people in our lives. Self-care, just like the grief process, looks different for everyone. So it's important to find something that reduces stress for you. We've highlighted a few here on the screen, but again, just finding what works for you is really important here. And prioritizing self-care, especially when we're going through tough times, can help us manage our feelings and handle events as they occur, and help us to stay more flexible during times of stress and uncertainty. We might want to try finding a little bit more time to be outdoors in New York before it gets too cold. Right now is not the greatest day, it's a little rainy, but again, getting that fresh air and kind of disconnecting from technology can be really helpful. So try a few, and if you'd like to give us feedback on what works, we're always open to that. So happy to share. And then moving forward, we're rounding out the time. So we'll just take a look at the Mahaney's Learning Communities portion of our website. We have a lot of great stuff coming up still, some virtual circles with peaceful schools and some book discussions. So please check that out if you're not familiar with everything that's going on right now. We're just gonna take a couple minutes to get into some questions. But again, as just a last reminder, we all have a lot on our plate right now, but if you're finding you need some extra support, there are some helplines available, and you can see them here, some text lines as well. So please jot those down, and we will post those when we share the recording as well. So take a peek to see some of the questions that were coming through.
Great, thanks, Whitney. And just a reminder to everyone, if you have a question, please put it in the question box. Raising your hand just lets us know that you have a question, but if you could type it out in the question box, that would be great. And I just wanted to thank you, Whitney. That was really helpful. I can say that as a parent, sometimes the hardest thing to do is to help our kids through loss. And I think that you provided a lot of great resources, and I hope people found some really good ones there. One of the questions that came up is, could you please repeat the books that you mentioned, the 2 grief books?
Absolutely. They are super cute too. Great illustrations. They are Grief is Like a Snowflake and Bug in a Vacuum. So those are really great picture books. Like I said, a lot of great details, and they really kind of just talk about the what ifs, the questions of what happens when a major change occurs. The Bug in the Vacuum is really cute in that way. He gets sucked up, and it's about his journey of unexpected transition. And then Grief is Like a Snowflake as well might be a great one for the holiday season. So.
All right, thank you. So this is one of the questions that came in. This is a great question. How do I help my child comfort or support a friend who has lost someone?
Okay, yeah, so this one can definitely be a challenge, especially given, depending on the age of the child. But like we would as adults, encouraging them to reach out, or letters, FaceTimes, whatever they're comfortable with, right, would be a first step. But reading your child is important. It might not exactly be something that they're entirely comfortable doing or talking about yet. So we don't want to add any extra stress by making them feel pressured to engage in a certain way with them. But if we let them know it's okay to ask a friend about their, loved one, or ask them to share a funny memory or story, or, what was your grandma's favorite food, something like that would be nice to let them know that you can connect and talk about it in a way that doesn't seem too heavy. So again, depending on the friend, the age, and the type of relationship, something like that can be supportive. And again, you can also help your child with that if the relationship calls for it. You guys can do an activity together, maybe bake some cookies and bring it to the family. Then they also feel supported. So again, you'll know what's best for you guys, but it can certainly be challenging. So I would just keep checking in as well. Like you may move on if your day to day gets busy, but the child may still be thinking about it later on. So just try to remind yourself to check back in.
Great. Thank you. A couple other these great questions coming in. So another one is, how do you help a student? And I guess this is coming from an educator, but this could be true of family members or neighbors as well, friends. How do you help a child who has lost a parent or a sibling when their own caregivers are in that denial stage? Because you talked about that's a very natural and important place for people to be. But how do we help young people if their primary caregiver is in that place?
Yeah, that is certainly a challenge. And again, I think that's why it's so important to have those multiple different types of supports. So when a loss like that occurs, if the school is aware, it might be necessary to connect with the counselor and really do some sort of wraparound support, right? The parent may need a warm hand to get connected to some higher level supports as well. And as teachers or counselors, we sometimes get put in those positions, and if you have a close relationship with them, you can gently suggest, everybody maybe taking a step further to get that support. But in terms of being the listening ear, just letting them process that and taking the time to hear them out is so important, especially if they're not able to get that at home, and then doing what you need to do in terms of relaying the steps to the appropriate people would help cover those bases. But that is,
Right.
challenging
Thank you.
situation. Yep.
And so there's a really nice comment here from someone who has experienced loss and said this presentation is spot on. But also wanted to remind people just to reach out to tell the person that you're thinking of them, even if you have no idea what to say, and that, not knowing what to say is still okay. So, no one knows what to say sometimes in these situations, and that's okay. Just reaching out makes a big difference. And I like what you said in your answer to the previous question, that sometimes really the best we can do is also support the caregivers. And in a way, we're supporting the children when we're able to support their caregivers. There's also another message from someone who's an immigration attorney, and I think this is really important, just to remind anyone who might be working with undocumented children who have lost a parent, that you want to connect them also with, like, the best kind of services that they can get. And that Action New York City is one place to get a free immigration consultant. And I think especially at this time, that's something we have to think about, is children who might have special circumstances, and not to shy away or be afraid that they might not be able to get the support that they need just because of their status, that resources such as Action New York City are available. And it's just important to make sure that we are connecting everyone who needs the help. Another question came through, and I think this is from a PTA president who wanted to know, how can you share this with your own parents? And so all of the webinars that we have hosted through this year as part of the Mother Cabrini Health Foundation have been posted to our website. And I'll go back to the previous slide just to show everybody the link. It's mentalhealthednys.org. Oh, sorry. Actually, this is our learning communities, but /parent is where you would find those. So definitely want to connect people to the recordings, which is where, as Whitney said, there will be additional resources posted. And we do have, I think, our website here as well.
Perfect.
So it's right about 12:30. I think that's it. Great job.
Yeah, we
Whitney.
hit the nail on the head today. So thank you guys for all being here today. And please feel free to reach out directly if you have any questions, and we're happy to help you to connect you to anything. So thank you all for being here today.
Have a great day.